Good.
Hey, Dr. Rob, I was just telling the
Hey,
group that your Psychology Today blog, we just learned today, has had over 22 million readers. That's majorly impressive. So I want to congratulate you on that.
thank you. It makes me very humble to think out of addiction and out of the craziness that I grew up with, that there's something that and I know you had a little craziness too, that we could do. Like, what a gift, the
Yes.
promises do come true, but you are rocking
Yes,
back and forth.
I
Are you
am.
feeling,
I'm nodding my head. I'm so, I mean,
oh,
like, I love those benchmarks. And I had mentioned to the group too that the podcast, Sex, Love, and Addiction, I haven't looked lately, but it passed the million download mark. I don't even know, a couple months ago, probably now. So, I mean, that just, I love the impact, because that's a positive impact, like you're saying, of what, the stuff that's happened to us in our lives and how it's turned, and now how we can share in a different and meaningful way with other people. So I'm
we
grateful
should
for your
record all
work.
of that.
Yeah. Well, we did. That was recorded. So,
Oh,
but
good. Well, I'll tell you one thing, Tammy.
mhm.
Sometimes I think therapists are a bit of a hypocrite. Not always, but I had a date this morning where I got up and I had coffee, and then I looked up and it was 5 o'clock, and I never left my desk except for a
Oh,
piece of
wow.
cheese. And we're supposed to do self-care, and you tell me if you left your desk today.
I did, because I went to the dentist.
Okay, I rest my case.
I
All right,
did.
what have we
So, yeah.
got? Hey, people,
Okay,
nice to
so
see you
the
tonight.
the first one is, I don't have a question, but want to say thanks for answering some of mine in prior sessions that helped. Good. I'm thrilled to hear that. So then the next one is, I'm a recovered addict. I never say that word.
Hey,
Working with
hey.
many men who are struggling with addiction. I have been having a really hard time working with a man who I believe has an addiction to narcissism. How do you work with such people? Do you have success with such people? What is the prognosis for such men? I have a question for Out of the Doghouse, but we'll get to that next. So
And
let's
actually, I have
talk
a
about.
question for you, which is, and I'm going to get this color right. I have a question for you, which is prognosis in terms of what? Do you think it means in terms of sexual recovery? Do you mean in terms of becoming a better person? What do you think that
Well,
actually
the
means?
only thing is, I believe he has an addiction to narcissism. So to me, that the
Right,
only
that's not how it
identified,
works.
addiction is narcissism. So
Okay.
now, we talk about narcissistic traits all the time with addicts, but
Uh-huh.
please share.
Well, narcissism is not an addiction. People who have addictions can be narcissistic, because if you think about addiction, it's all about me, what I want, when I want, nothing about others, no empathy, leave me alone, don't bother me. So every aspect of being an addict in many ways is about being a narcissist. But in other words, the whole world revolves around me, whether it helps others or hurts others. But you and I have talked about people who in their active addiction will do incredibly narcissistic things, but in recovery will work triple hard to amend those and make people and bring their peace to it. So a narcissism is not an addiction, it is a character trait. And it is more pronounced in addicts because we get very self-focused in our addictions. When we leave our addictions, it isn't like we just, and I heard this from a lot of spouses, it's not like we just solve all those characterological and personality issues just because we're sober. And that is what you guys expect, which I understand, which is we're going to be nicer, more empathic, and more gentle people when we're sober. And we might be, but we are still going to be self-focused and unempathic, and because that's part of who we've always been, and it requires therapy and a lot of work on yourself. And I might say that the 12 steps are really a guide out of focus on the self and toward a focus on others, for sure. But in any
He
case,
he
go
does
ahead, Tammy.
add that he is also a sex addict, so there is
Oh,
clarity. So
okay.
he is a sex addict, but apparently a high level of narcissism. So
Well, I can't get this shirt to do what I want.
it's
Um,
fine.
I know, but I'm narcissistic and I want my shirt to look right. Anyway, sorry, you guys are listening online. You'll get it. So um, I think that the work with a narcissistic person is to stay out of any kind of criticism or control, or even kind of challenging their thinking in a very direct way, because they're going to experience that as criticism. But I think what works with the people that I work with who are more narcissistic is to really ask them, are the things you're doing bringing you what you want? It's a very simple question. What do you want? Well, I want healthy family. I want my spouse to stop bugging me. I want to have more time to spend with whatever. Okay, but you're spending all your money on sex workers and you're spending all your time looking at porn. And so with a narcissist, it's a lot about presenting these conflicts, which aren't personal, like you're doing. It's just like, well, gee, you seem to want this, but and this is what you're talking to me about as a sponsor and how I'm trying to help you. But then you're doing this, and I don't know which one is important to you. So I think it's a lot about posing questions and being curious rather than challenging and confronting, unless, I have to say, someone like in my role with a lot of experience and running treatment programs, I can and do confront. I confront a lot. In fact, I have a reputation for it with the clients, but that's because, I've been doing this for a very long time. And I know the timing, I know the situation, I know the words, because I've done it a whole lot of times. And in fact, I think, just to do a little advertising, one of the more useful things about going to treatment and seeking integrity is I'm doing some of the work. I'm there 8-10 hours a week. So my confrontation skills show up. But in any case, I think unless you're a skilled professional, you can only say to somebody, it seems like you were really in a crisis about that happening. Someone found out, or there was a job issue, and you came running to me wanting help. But now that the crisis is over, I'm curious. Don't you think So anyway, it's really about pointing out incongruities in their thinking. The less confrontational you can be, unless you're, really skilled at it, I think the better, because a narcissist will think, well, you don't like me, or you're just picking on me, or, because it is all about me. So, but the prognosis is good, provided the person has the capacity to be honest. That's all it takes. Recovery, if you can just tell the truth, your experience, be honest, you can get there. But it takes so if someone is so narcissistic that they're constantly lying, constantly hiding, and even in recovery, they are still keeping whole blocks of things to themselves, they're not being honest. And without honesty, the whole thing is, quite honestly, up for grabs. So Tammy, I talked for a long time. Did you fill in?
No, but that's really helpful. And so, as a sponsor, we share our experience, strength, and hope. And and any addict, I've shared this many times in my own, 12-step journey. It's like, I'm grateful that the 12 steps are a suggested program of recovery. If you want what we have and are willing to go to any lengths to get it, then you're ready to take certain steps. So it's doing the work. And like Dr. Rob said, the 12 steps. Steps 4 through 9 are the meat of the program. 10 through 12 are, the ongoing, daily, the daily things. But 4 through 9 is where those character traits and character defects, that's what we call them in 12 step is, that's where we're working on those. So, if you want what we have, like Dr. Rob said, if you want, a healthy family, if you want to have more money because you're spending it on, you're acting out. I mean, here's what you can do, but you've shared, Dr. Rob, before too, that true narcissists don't really care. So they don't really seek help because they don't really care, right?
Well, narcissists, like addicts, seek help when they get in trouble, or they're losing something important, or their narcissism. A lot of narcissists struggle with relationships, as you can imagine. So I know for some of us, it's about, I've lost so many relationships. I let people down. I hurt them. I said things that weren't very nice. And I don't want to have these losses anymore. So it's still about the self. Even in treatment, when men first come into seeking integrity or in other different kinds of care, the first word, the first thought is, I don't want to be like this. I can't believe I hurt people. I feel so ashamed. I'm embarrassed. It's not really empathy, like, I can't believe what the people I love have gone through. It's about, look at what I'm going through. So even in the early stages of recovery, that narcissism is still there, because it's all about my pain and my unhappiness and my fear. I can't believe I did this to the people I love. Well, how about what they're feeling, what they're going through? But that part takes a while. And, recovery takes as long as it takes. I mean, sobriety, but being a better person can take a long, long time. By the way, I typed something, Tammy, you're going to like this. Oops, if I can make it go. This is one of my favorite statements about narcissism.
Yes. Do you want to be right or be happy? And that is a great question for narcissistic folks. Yes, I think that is, and we can fight, Yeah, and and some people, in Eddie Caparucci talked about this last Wednesday again too. It's like at some
Tell
point,
everyone who he is, because
Eddie
you tend to.
Caparucci does, I do, does on sexandrelationshiphealing.com. He does the third Wednesday of the month webinar. So in addition to Dr. Rob, we have a series, Alex, I've been saying his name wrong for the longest time. So Alex Avila does the 40 forms of intimacy. He's the first week of the month, and Kristen Snowden does the second. And then Dr. Eddie Caparucci, who wrote Inner Child and Going Deeper and Why Men Struggle to Love. He
So
is on
are
the
these
third week of the month.
moderated
Wait.
lectures?
And then
Go ahead.
Troy Love is the fourth with attachment wounds. But every week on Wednesdays, they are there doing like this, only they have a lecture series as the first half of it. And then they answer questions for people. But he talked about, I forgot where I was going with this, but he talked about that specifically with that they need.
Well, you want to be right, or do you
yes,
want to? Right.
yeah, the fighting of like, well, you don't have that, like you misunderstood what I'm saying, like digging in your heels and correcting,
Right.
is not
Very
helpful
narcissistic.
but yeah, and it's not helpful to building a healthy relationship. And his is getting to the other side, so it's about relationships. So, and whether it's a primary relationship with a significant other or just your work relationships, if you're always doing, well, I'm right and you just don't understand it, it drives a wedge versus showing up differently. So
But I do want to say now, okay, I want to get that right. Every Wednesday at what time?
9:30 a.m. to 10:30 a.m. Pacific time.
Okay, and that
every
costs how
month,
much?
zero.
Oh, it's
Double
free.
zero.
Okay, that's
Zero,
really
zero,
good.
zero. Yeah. But it's
So
like yours and Dr. David's, and we've got a plethora, like that word, a plethora of webinars and drop-in groups on
they're free.
sexandrelationshiphealing.com. Free.
We should make more of them into blogs. I mean, into podcasts, I think, because then people would hear. But anyway, it's a whole other conversation.
Yes.
I did want to say one more thing about narcissism, which is what's under it. Because narcissists are not just bad people who think that the world revolves them and that everyone should agree with them. I mean, we look like that. We look how fancy this car is. That means I'm important. Or look at this degree I have. That means I'm special. Or look at this person on my arm. That they're beautiful. So I mean, but what's underneath all that is is desperate insecurity. The reason I have to put out there this face, this aren't I amazing face, is the opposite. And this is where all this stuff comes in. If you knew me, if you really understand what was going on inside of me, you wouldn't love me, you wouldn't care about me, you'd abandon me. So I'm going to put up a front that is pretty much unsealed, and that brings people in to think I'm great, but I don't let anybody criticize or judge me in my mind, because they might get underneath to that I'm not good enough part. But trust me, beneath every narcissist is a very insecure person who's afraid of being abandoned. And that's what the narcissism is. It's a lid on that. It's a mask. And it's one of the things that you have to deal with in treatment, because if you're going to get somebody to really understand what their partner has been through, then they have to pull that mask off and see themselves clearly. Good thing we have them for 4 weeks.
Yeah, well, 14, 21, or 28 days. But that's every addict, Dr. Rob. It's not, I mean, and that facade and that compartmentalization. I mean, like I remember, like you're talking about that, and I remember if they really knew who I was, I'm unlovable, and so, and now, like in recovery, people can like me or not, and that's okay. It doesn't change who I am, and I don't have to change to be something for them. So,
Right.
so recovery, that journey is so healing, and and it changes everything, but it is a journey, and there's no magical fix for things. But I think that's also why every addict looks narcissistic, because it is all about me and keeping people pushed away. I want you close, but stay away. That whole crazy. Yeah, it's crazy, but that's addiction. Okay. He has another part. I'm a recovered. Oh, no, wait, no. I also have a question about Out of the Doghouse for Men who are addicts with SSA, same-sex attraction, and how different is that betrayal, with any different ideas on how to get healing for such couples. So can you talk about that?
Yeah, I mean, it depends on the person. I think that, and I want to be very, very general. Okay, this is general. It's not specific to every person, but in general, women seem to feel that sexual behavior outside of their relationship is not just something they didn't agree to and is awful and they're angry about and they were lied to. That's for sure in place. But they also think of it as a direct threat to, how do I say this? As a direct threat to love. Like, if you're doing this, you don't love me. And I hear that a lot from spouses. How can you love me and do this at the same time? And I think that is, in general, more of a woman's experience, because you very closely track sex and intimacy. Healthy women don't generally go have sex with people that in some way they don't care about, or some way they don't feel connected to or appreciate, unless they're really drunk, in which case they'll do it whatever. But men in general tend to not only look at, and I'm talking about healthy men, be able to separate sexuality and relationships. So I can go to that bachelor party in Vegas where there's a stripper, and then I can go home and it doesn't mean anything to me. I don't think it had anything to do with my relationship. It was a bunch of guys going to Vegas bachelor party. But if I come home and tell you, my female partner, that I was out there watching naked women undress, you would say things like, I can't believe you did that. I thought you loved me. What does our relationship mean to you? And I'm, as a guy, thinking, well, but all I did was, whatever it is with a stripper. So, by the way, ladies, you don't like hearing this. It's much easier, and we know this as men, that what you want to hear is love, romance, flowers, vacations, jewelry. But every man is every man. And I'm telling you, most, if not all, men have the capability to split off sex from relationship. So if you're a man, you already know that. So if you are a man and you're in a relationship with a man, you can more easily understand, I think, that there is a casual sex, I mean, occasionally, that might happen, and it isn't necessarily a direct threat to the love that you share, because men understand that men can compartmentalize. However, if you are a man who has not just had a little bit of this or that, but is truly addicted and crazy, then any partner is going to say, male or female, oh my God, like, what is going, I thought you loved that, So I don't think that the main themes of Out of the Doghouse are particularly different for two men versus a man and a woman. The reason I wrote Out of the Doghouse is, Out of the Doghouse, a relationship saving guide for men caught cheating, which is a book and a course, and my most popular book, by the way. It's there to teach men how to have empathy for their partners. And I think that addicts, and men in particular, we're not particularly good at wanting to understand or listen or ask questions, or we just kind of want to have the answer and fix it. And when I'm having an affair and you get upset with me, I just want to fix it. And it's been 6 weeks and I've sent you flowers and I don't care about them anymore. So you should forgive me. And so I've never met a man yet in my entire life who really knows how cheating affects and what betrayal trauma is, how it affects a woman. It doesn't mean that men aren't traumatized too. It's just that men in general are kind of not particularly good at cleaning up broken intimacy. We think flowers, it's going to be easy. And so I wrote this book because it takes maybe a year or longer for there to be some kind of trust and relationship restored. And that's provided that the guy who did all this to the woman he's involved with does these things, because men don't always understand how to be empathic. It is equally the same for being with a man, which is, I know that I have no idea how to make you feel better. I have no idea but I do know that there is a path. And let me say one more thing about Doghouse, because sometimes people say, well, my husband isn't really, or my wife isn't really being empathic. They just learned it from your book or your course. And my answer is that may be true. They may not know how to inside of themselves feel empathy, but if I can teach someone to act empathically, then that's going to bring them a reward. Because if you say, I'm angry and I can't believe you did this, and I say, you're absolutely right, I really hurt you and let you down, I don't know what I was, empathic, then you're probably going to get a little less angry, or you're probably going to be a little bit kinder. So I have learned that if I say things this way over time, you are going to act more gently and more lovingly. And if I say them the way I used to, you're not. And so what I am training people is by their experience to learn that they get further and they are heard better and things de-escalate when they act empathically. And if you do it long enough, you will just be empathic. It's practice, and then practice makes perfect. And unfortunately, many of us who have trauma I won't ever natively experience empathy in certain circumstances. I do sometimes, but not always. What I've learned in a lot of therapy and recovery is, yes, I do have that deficit, but I can clean it up. We have steps in the 12 steps that say, look at your behavior this today. It doesn't meet your values and needs. Okay, maybe not, go back and clean it up. That's part of doing the steps regularly. So in answer to your question, I think it's a great course and a great book for any man who's dealing with having hurt a partner. The only caveat is I haven't written the book for women who cheat on men yet. And that's going to take a woman to write because I've decided that's not my expertise. So Tammy, I'm not even sure if I answered that question, but
you did. You did a great job, and there was a lot there. So I have a bunch of things to tag on. So on sexandrelationshiphealing.com, we have a drop-in group for men who are betrayed partners. We have a female addict drop-in group, free too, but for the men, they can be in a relationship with a woman or with a man, and they are there and they get support. So that is number one. The out of the doghouse for men who have been caught cheating, I wholeheartedly agree that it can be for both. We have the out of the doghouse work groups, 6-week live facilitated. So there's homework, but there's also peer connection that can be for people who have struggled with addiction, but it can also be for people who have just cheated, because it still is a fracture of trust. I want to go back to what you're talking about too. One of the sayings around 12 steps is act your way into good thinking. You can't think your way into good acting, but you can act your way into good thinking. So what you're demonstrating is, if I do these things and then my thinking starts to change. But like you said, right, there was that went better than my normal way. And there wasn't this big escalation. So, I'm going to do more of that. I think addicts that come into recovery are at, the kindergarten level, on an emotional basis. And so it takes time to work through all of that, and some of us are faster learner, but some of us have more brokenness, and more going on. And some of us, just plain aren't as willing as others. So, I would encourage this sponsor to suggest the out of the doghouse work group, the next time it's offered, for that, and see. But at some point, everybody on their recovery journey gets to pick. Do they want to be in a better relationship? Do they want to still have the same chaos? I personally think we all deserve to be in healthy relationships. We deserve to have the joy of having connection, but not everybody, not everybody's ready for that. This person did tag on and say, I find it almost impossible for him to have any empathy for his wife. That, and it seems like empathy and narcissism are mutually exclusive, and they are. Yeah.
But I wanted to say two more things. There is a Christian version of Out of the Doghouse, and I've heard some people who are very faith-based. In fact, that's why I rewrote that book with a really good friend of ours who is a pastor, and she and she primarily added a lot of scripture for those folks who feel more comfortable relying on that word rather than just the psychological. There is a Christian version of Out of the Doghouse.
A redemptive guide for men caught cheating
It's a redemptive guide.
A redemptive instead of a step-by-step relationship.
Tammy, it looks like you're reaching into heaven, like you completely, your arm disappears. That's amazing. I did want to say something else about what you said, which is, well, two things. They say in some of the 12-step programs that when I'm pointing one finger at you, there are three pointing back at me. And I think that that's part of addicts, is we make everything, part of being narcissistic is it's never your fault. It's your fault and your fault and your fault, because I don't want to look at myself. That's part of being narcissistic. So I will blame my spouse. I will blame, and then I'll feel entitled. Like, you're not very attentive to me and you gained all this weight. You did this. So I'm entitled to go act out and do whatever I want. Or I'm putting all my money and energy into XYZ and I'm not getting much back. So I'm entitled. Entitlement, by the way, is a good example of narcissism. If nobody's entitled, we can hopefully be deserving or worthy, but no one is entitled. The last thing I wanted to say was something related to what you, and by the way, when I look down, I'm not working on a phone, I'm taking notes. If you see me, however, doing this, whatever, then I'm on the phone. So Tammy mentioned what I would consider to be intellectual age versus emotional age. And I think this is a real challenge for some of the men I work with, because some of them are so bright and have really achieved a lot in their lives, or they can see the path ahead toward achieving a lot. And so intellectually, they may be very gifted and they've been able to have ideas, have dreams, and follow through on them. So on the intellectual end, it feels like, wow, I'm really good at whatever, and I can get my needs met, blah, blah, blah. But emotionally, they're 5. And they don't understand that emotionally they're 5 because they look at themselves as being one person. Intellectually and successfully, I'm all of this. And so I think part of dealing with narcissism is helping inform the intellect part, that the little kid has been running the show. And this is what Eddie Caparucci talks about, and trying to be able to examine, okay, because addicts are really little kids. And these little kids are not there to terrify us. I really believe addiction is my friend. It is the little young part of me pulling on my arm saying, pay attention to me. You need something. Go call somebody. The problem is, being an addict, I don't want to hear it. I'm like, shut up, leave me alone. I'll handle it on my own. And so that relationship between the intellectual adult and the emotional child has to be built as a part of recovery. And that allows me to be my emotional age to some degree. So yeah, that was it. All I wrote.
Okay, next one. I'm a betrayed partner 16 months post D-Day trickle. He is sober and stuck at step 3. His most recent event was looking at not porn on YouTube 2 days ago. Prior to that, he touched me inappropriately and I held up my boundary. He doesn't understand why I'm still upset. I get the apology for those actions 5 minutes ago. He's also present. Can you tell him why I'm still upset with him right now, please?
I think you could probably do that, Tammy, but why don't we
No,
both
go
try
ahead.
it?
Yeah. Well, and I do want to talk about the not porn YouTube, because like we're hearing more and more about that too. So yeah.
Well, a lot of what we study, or I want to say study, hold on a second. I want to get back to the question. So a lot of what we talk about in recovery for partners is this thing called betrayal trauma. And it's called trauma for a reason. We see it like someone who's been through war, or someone's been through an earthquake, or someone's been through some long-term imprisonment, which some of you partners have been. But when you've been through a traumatic event, you are always scanning to see where that next traumatic event is going to come from. Because if something just happened to you, you're kind of looking to see, well, where's it going to happen again? Where's it going to, for example, you may, if you have a car accident, you may really avoid driving for a while. And when you drive, you find yourself driving slower and looking around because you've had a trauma. So where someone touching you, I mean, your husband touching you in a way that didn't feel right or comfortable. Perhaps if he wasn't a sex addict or she wasn't a sex addict, it wouldn't bother you. You'd be like, hey, get out of there. What are you thinking? But because there's a history of trauma here around sexuality, it brings up all these feelings that are much bigger or seem much bigger than the actual incident. And this happens with us all the time because as an addict, I may come home 20 minutes late because I was stuck on the freeway bringing groceries home to you. But it's 6, and I was supposed to be home at 6. And so you think, oh my God, you're at it again. You're late again. That's not because I necessarily was. I was actually at the grocery store, but it doesn't matter because the feeling that brings up for you is, oh my God, when they used to be late, they were at this, and now they're probably at it again. And by the way, having a lack of empathy means we just say to you, well, I was just getting the groceries and what's the big deal? And I was doing this for you and you should have seen the traffic, rather than, hopefully you got this 5 minutes ago, I realized, this is very out of the doghouse. I realized the other day when I was defending the grocery, well, how silly was that? Of course you would think that every time I go out and I'm late, I'm acting out. I did it for so many years, and I'm so sorry that you have to carry that with you every time I come late. That might happen later after the out of the doghouse course. But regardless, when one of your boundaries is crossed, here's another way of thinking about it, much more minor than the one you're talking about. But I had a woman end her relationship with her spouse because he was lying about taking out the garbage. I mean, literally, he was lying about it. And, he said he took it out, but he didn't. And then she was changing her clothes and he took it out and she realized it. And she said to him, if I can't trust you to just take out the garbage when you're going to take out the garbage, how can I trust you to not to tell me when you're having an affair or you're acting out? So we do those things, like not get why you're upset, but we can learn how to help you. We can learn how to help you understand that we do know what made you upset. The reason you're still upset is because it's a trigger for all the things in the past, and how could it not be? But it's so not okay that he touched you, that whatever inappropriate was. And I think that I would want him to come back with an answer, like, what did your therapist say? Or what did your sponsor say? Or are you looking at it differently? Because I don't just want to hear the right words. I want to know that the person with actually understands what they did and why I'm so hurt. So anyway, Tammy, now what did I miss?
No, well, I'm stuck back on the 2 days ago. He looked at not porn and then
Oh, okay, I'll
apologized.
take the second
So,
half. You take the.
yeah. Because I'm like, there's a whole bunch here. It's like, why are you stuck on step 3? Those are like, your sponsor can help you get through those. So steps 4 through 9, I mentioned it earlier. That's where the meat of the work is. So like, that's how you start to make big shifts. I know lots of people that hang out on step 3 because they're just they're afraid of scared. They're afraid of doing step 4. And I'm like, the most freeing stuff was steps 4 and 5 for me, the most freeing. So I would encourage you to get unstuck, on that. But I'm also going, did you partner discover him doing that, or did he come to you 5 minutes ago and that's when you knew? And it matters, because if there's a 24-hour rule in place, which I hope you have, and if you aren't familiar with that, it is about how long of a time frame that you have to, that you have to come forward and say, I looked at a not porn YouTube, and that's in my inner circle, and and here's what I've done since then. I've called my sponsor, I'm going to a meeting, whatever, here's what I'm doing to rectify that. But if it's like you found out 2 days ago and he's just coming forward, that's a big problem too.
Tammy, I really want to add to that, because it just struck me, and I'm glad you pointed out. So I hate to say this to you, I'll say SM because you put your initials there. I hate to say this to you, SM, but I don't think your partner's sober.
I don't either.
I have never heard, I've heard a lot of, well, I just happened to look at this on Instagram, and it isn't really porn because I saw it on TikTok. It's like, well, yeah, it is. Someone's running around in bathing suits and, playing, they may not be doing something that is overtly sexual, but if you're sitting there for an hour and a half looking at Instagram photos of women or men, depending on what turns you on, that is a slip. And so one of the things that might trigger me in your situation is somehow deep inside feeling like, oh, I thought, how can you work on this? And it can be sober to look at YouTube videos. It's nothing wrong with looking at YouTube videos if you and I are trying to figure out how to. In fact, Tammy, I figured out how to do the clean cycle on my washing machine by watching a YouTube video. And I was really glad, because I didn't know how to do the clean tub thing. And now I do. But I don't sit around and look at people, cavorting at a club in Vegas by the near naked pool, because it may be on YouTube, but it certainly isn't good for my recovery. So I really wonder if what this partner of yours is calling sobriety may not really be sobriety, even if he believes it. That doesn't sound right to me. And by the way, I've had a lot of guys come to Seeking Integrity for treatment who said this exact thing, which is, well, I was just looking at Instagram, or, and then not too long later, after Rob, little confrontation, it becomes, yeah, the truth is I was scanning all that stuff for images, and I didn't want to look at the porn, because then I'd have to say I had a slip, but I can look at the almost porn, and it's the same thing. The same thing drives it. And it's the same kind of secrecy. By the way, I would ask him, if you really want to know, to show you what not porn videos he was looking on at YouTube. And if it isn't something you'd want to show your, 12-year-old kid, then it probably isn't okay. Yeah, and no matter what he says. So thanks, Tammy, because I just looked at that. I don't think he is sober.
I don't either. Yeah. Maybe periods of some abstinence, but that is not any kind of, quality sobriety or recovery. So, but I looked at a YouTube video on how to clean my luggage, because my luggage was really dirty on the outside. And so yeah, that's the kind of YouTube. I'm looking for useful things that will clean my luggage.
I have to tell you that to clean the tub, you have to press the control lock and the eco at the same time. And I'm just
Every
too old for that. I can't figure
every
out.
model is different. So yes, but yes, those are really useful. And yes, I've looked up a lot of
But not
things
for
for,
what our
yeah,
folks
yeah,
are looking
yeah,
for. And by the
exactly.
way, some people have on their plans no Instagram, no YouTube, no
Yeah,
TikTok. They're there
yeah,
for a reason.
no
Okay, let's go on,
Facebook.
Tammy.
Yeah, I mean, like, yeah, it's like being really clear about what recovery is and isn't is incredibly helpful and useful for partners to understand too. Like
To feel
they
safe.
they
Yeah.
should know. Yeah, my PASA is 6 months sober from a 40-year porn addiction. That is awesome because that's a really long time of being stuck. So I want to, acknowledge that. So he does podcasts and the Fortify app, but no 12-step program or CSAT. That is concerning. I know he needs therapy, but is frozen in taking those steps. He has HX of a history of sexual assault at age 6. We have sex once or twice a week, but I definitely feel compelled to because he is not in true recovery, not because I feel safe and want to. I want to help him heal, but I can't make him take the next steps. Any suggestions? Thank you so much for asking. We get this a lot. It's like, I want to help him, but I don't know what to do. And it isn't your job ultimately. So, but anyway, Dr. Rob.
Well, I know we're both going to have things to say about this, so we might go back and forth. But
Mhm.
the word that feels like an absolute gut wrencher, and it's interesting because if you read this, the person put it in quotes, which
Mhm.
is the word frozen.
Mhm.
And to me, that feels like a kind of gut punch. Like, look, if he's inside of an ice cube and can't get out, he's probably frozen. But the weather isn't even cold enough to be frozen. So I'm making some metaphors here, but there is
Mhm.
no frozen. There's a willingness or a lack of willingness. And, if he is sober, then he's shown some willingness. But what does sober mean? And the Tammy's going to go after this. When someone stops drinking, but they don't get this 12-step support they need, or at least intensive therapy, we call that person a dry drunk. And what that means is they may not be drinking, but they're still a real a-hole, and they continue to be that way, rigid and difficult and narcissistic, because they haven't had to look at themselves. All they did was, pull out the thing that was most upsetting to everyone else. But they still don't know how to cope with relationships and be healthy in intimacy. So they're still difficult. And I understand that is, but that's a place of choice. So a couple of things. I feel compelled to have sex with him. What does that mean? Just like he is not frozen, you are not compelled. There may be for spiritual and religious reasons that you feel an obligation to be sexual with your partner. I cannot speak to that, and that's for your clergy. But beyond that, if I don't feel, you wrote, I feel he is not in true recovery, not because I feel safe and want to. I mean, you don't feel safe. Why would you have sex with someone with whom you don't feel safe? So to me, the issue, and I was going to toss this to Tammy, is one about boundaries. And I want to toss it to you, Tammy, just using that word if I can.
Yeah, healthy boundaries are your physical safety, your emotional safety, which you don't feel safe, financial, and spiritual. So, I mean, I look at all of those areas, and they aren't, if you don't do this, then I'm not going to. It's about what, but it can be, gosh, I vision us having a really great relationship, and I want to help, move towards that. But until I really see changes and your willingness to step into a true recovery, then I need to hold myself safe. And so that's going to, I'm just making this up. You guys get to take what you need and leave the rest. But, for me, I'm going to ask you to sleep in a different bedroom. I'm not going to have sex with you, because I want to feel safe. I want it to be a point of connection, not an obligation. We were talking about laundry. I was talking about cleaning. Those are obligations. We're going to do things like that. Sex should not be, in my opinion, one of the obligations. So, but I'm also going, I'm not Catholic, but I've used this before. I feel like it's purgatory. It's the worst possible place to not act out, but not have any recovery tools. It's like, because if the acting out was the coping mechanism, the maladaptive coping mechanism, and now I'm not doing that, but I don't have any tools to use to do things differently, which is what we learn in recovery with 12-step, with other people, with our CSAT, with unpacking the stuff that happened, the sexual trauma. I mean, like, honestly, that's the stuff that he can get some freedom from the pain of without using his sex addiction, porn addiction, we can learn to do things differently. And then it can be from a place of healing and joy. We don't have to continue to carry around that pain. So he would have a much better and different experience. It goes back to the last person too. I'm stuck on step 3. Then again, if you want what we have and are willing to go to any lengths to get it. And I want serenity. I want joy. I want peace. I want the good things in life, not the chaos and pain that I carried in my addiction. So
I wanted to, Tammy, this because I write a lot, that words are very, words and meanings of words are very important to me. And so I went to look up the word compelled. And I want to tell you what it means. It means to be forced, to be coerced, to be pressured, to be driven. So what the dictionary says is that you either feel forced or coerced by the other person, or you feel like you have to convince yourself that you must do something that you don't really want to do. And I wouldn't want to be. I am compelled to pay my taxes. Trust me, I am compelled to fix my roof because it had a leak, but I am not compelled to have sex with anybody. And if I feel compelled or I am being compelled, so one more thing. Sex offending, for anybody who ever wants to understand it, it's the simplest thing of all. It's non-consensual. It means the person I'm being sexual with has not consented to seeing me, viewing me, being with me, whatever it is they didn't consent to. And so I would really wonder, if you set a boundary, which is I don't want to be sexual with you because I don't feel safe, what will happen at the other end? To what degree will you feel respected and acknowledged, or to what degree are you going to get blamed and demanded of? I think that'll say a lot about where your relationship is. Remember, right now, we don't set boundaries to create change in other people. We set boundaries to take care of ourselves. But when we set those boundaries, our partners may realize, oh, I can't get away with everything. I can't get everything I want. I can't do anything whenever I ask it to happen. And I think that does produce change. Not that you did it to make us change, but because we're used to having what we want, and all of a sudden we can't have what we want, and why not? And I guess I'll have to get to work if I want to have that. So in that way, you're setting your boundaries is good for every part of the recovery process.
So, okay, the next question is, my SA husband had what I would classify as a slip. We had a big argument, and I'm sure that triggered him, and it definitely triggered me. But I think the idea of slips possibly being part of recovery for addicts hit home for us. Am I being stupid to think him acknowledging his slip and wanting to talk about it? I'm not ready to speak to him right now is a move in the right direction for his recovery. Not celebrating his slip, but acknowledging he did something wrong.
Well, I'm not in your relationship, and I am not personally affected by what you're going through. For you, in your life, I would feel like I don't want to talk to him, and I can't believe he did this, and here we are one more time. And you can't not feel that way. It's that trauma thing. All of it explodes. You can feel you're right back to day one, and I understand that. But this is the best sign of all. This is the best sign I can think of, that someone took a behavior that they knew. Your partner took a behavior that they knew would upset you. They knew you would be angry at them. They knew you'd be disappointed. They knew it might set you back. And they were willing to tell you the truth anyway. And to me, that is a high sign of recovery. Number one, it's not a relapse, because relapse involves making this mistake and then doing it again and again and again and hiding it. This person did not hide it. I understand the argument. Like, who would want to go through this all again, and who would want to be feeling these feelings? I get it, but yeah, slips are a part of recovery. And I want to say to all 35 people here that it happens. And for every one of you partners who says, if you do this again, I'm leaving you, be prepared to leave, because this is not recovery in drugs and alcohol where you can not drink and not use the rest of your life. We're trying to integrate, like an eating disorder. What is healthy? What is not healthy? How do I manage this? And slips happen. They're not intentional. I'm not necessarily thinking I'm going to go out and do this, but I set myself up to eventually be in a situation where that happens, and I make that choice. What do I learn from that? I learn not to go to the situations. I learn not to talk to those people. I learn from my slips. It happens, but it won't happen the same way again, or it may never happen again, because, and I'll tell you all this, one of my favorite statements is, you cannot learn if you can't make mistakes. The way we grow and learn is by making mistakes, and we learn from them. So I actually expect that someone is likely to have a slip, and it is absolutely imperative to me that they go tell their partner, not right away. I would give it a little time. I would talk to someone else first, because you don't want to go to your partner and say, oh my God, what did I do? And look what I did. And will anybody ever forgive me like you? It's best to talk to a sponsor or therapist first, and then you can calmly go to your spouse and say, look, yesterday, blah, 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 and I talked over with my sponsor, and this is where I'm at, because you said something else about not wanting, I wouldn't want to talk about it with him either. And I don't think it's your job to talk about it. It's your job to be angry and hurt and disappointed. But there must be some part of every spouse who has that experience that you're talking about that says, you know, I freaking hate this, and I can't believe he or she is doing this again. And how could I ever feel love for them when they've disappointed me so many times? All of that will come up, but there'll be a little teeny part of you, I guarantee, that'll say, but this is different, because now it's not a secret. And I know what's going on. I may hate it, but I know what's going on. And that's different because I have never had honesty from this person before. So it's not your job. No one should celebrate the slip. But and it's real. What I would celebrate his willingness to be honest, his acknowledging that he did something wrong, his trying to figure out how to do it differently. The one thing I don't understand is the argument. We had a big argument. Well, actually, I want to say two things about that. I don't care if you argued, brought in lawyers, and sued each other. That is not. That doesn't give me permission to act out. I want to say this to every spouse every time I'm here, and you want to write this down, because I tell spouses this every time I work with them individually. There is nothing you are doing. Write this down, spouses. There's nothing you are doing, or nothing I am doing, nothing I have ever done. So there's nothing I am doing, and there's nothing I have ever done, and there is nothing I can do to make this person act out. Not in the past, not in the present, not in the future. I can piss them off. I can make them disappointed. I can have a fight with them, but then they can go for a walk. They can go get a pet. They can go, talk to a friend, or, talk to a sponsor, or there are a world of things I can do when I'm upset. I can be upset with you. I can be upset with whatever, but the logical conclusion of being upset is never to go act out. If I want to go act out, it's my responsibility. I made that decision. It doesn't matter. You may have gained 300 pounds and never talked to me, and it doesn't matter. I decide. I could leave you, but I don't have to go hide and keep secrets, and that's my decision. So I want to really intervene on that for everybody, which is I'm sure the fight did trigger him, and I'm sorry you had an argument, and I'm sorry it triggered you in your trauma. But I really want to say that there's nothing about that experience that gave this person permission to go act out. And I say that to all you spouses because sometimes I hear, well, if I hadn't done this, or I need to look at how I've done that, or, I did set him up for acting out, or her. It doesn't matter what you did or didn't do. It's up to us to stay sober.
That's where I was going with all this, was the triggers, because life is full of triggers, and whether it's a fight or a promotion at work, it doesn't matter. There was always an excuse to act out. Things are bad, things are good, doesn't matter. So I'm bored. So I actually agree with that. And the purpose of recovery, well, one of the things about recovery is having a plan so that when I am triggered, I know what I'm going to do. And I have to have that plan in advance, because I'm never going to think about it with the executive brain, the thinking part of my brain in the moment when I'm triggered, because I want to react, and I've shared this before. My go-to mantra for calming myself down, and I still use it today, is the serenity prayer. And it reminds me that the only thing I have control of is my actions and reactions. And I would say that over and over again. And the mindfulness of saying that would help calm me down. I got to admit, I would much rather do, like Dr. Rob said, it's your fault and you did this. No, it's regardless of who's doing what, I have no control over any of that stuff. I am responsible for my actions and my reactions. That's it. So, okay. So, let's see. The next one is
my spouse has sex addiction.
Yes.
Checking the
So
box.
checking the boxes type. He had a slip and didn't tell me for a month. Now he tells me things about his golf games. I set a boundary to not tell me about slips and relapses now, but now he decides to, to tell me about stuff like golf games. I kind of feel like he can go F himself. I didn't say that, which is a win for me, but I want to implement a boundary that I just want the time he will be home. We have kids and have zero need to know what his boundary is. And then there's a correction. Meant, is this boundary okay? I don't want to know what he does, as he feels he has the power to disclose info to me. He seems okay to disclose.
Um, why don't you start that one, Tammy? And there's
Well,
so, or
to
if you
me, I
want to
mean,
feed different questions,
yeah,
because there's so much in there.
yeah. I mean, it's like, I mean, I think you're being really clear of this is, I want to know because we have children. So I need to know where you're coming and going. It also feels like you have, like Dr. Rob has talked about this before, where, you know, where you're still in the fight and everything. It feels like you've been able to extricate yourself and go, don't care, you do you. You know, we have kids. I'm creating my life and taking care of the children, and you're going to do what you're going to do. And that, that is pretty freeing on a lot of levels, because his addiction is not controlling every moment of both of your worlds. So, but I also, it's like, yeah, it feels like extraneous information with the golf games. And I've heard this before too, with, yeah, he's going golfing with the people that he used to act out with, or who were, that at least knew he was acting out. So it can be a non-safe place, even in something that, he's probably not golfing with his 12-step buddies, is my thought. But, the boundaries are personal. If it's working for you, it's working for you. So.
I find this well, first of all, you absolutely have the right to set a boundary and say, I don't want to hear about your slips and relapses. I'm having a hard enough time getting through the day, and I've got kids to take care of, and right now, and I don't have therapy support or whatever that is. So please leave me in peace. I don't want to know. Absolutely okay. You may feel, I mean, many spouses feel like I've got to know everything right now. I also know spouses who say, I couldn't handle it if you let me, I've got too much on my own plate. So I want to respect and really say that to everyone, because some of you feel like, well, I've got to demand, and you don't. You can find out, things at a time when it feels safe for you. What else do I want to say to you about this? But then the golf games. So I don't quite understand, because it sort of seems like you're saying, I don't want to talk about deep and heavy things with him, but then when he comes home with shallow things, I don't understand why he's not talking about something meaningful. So I don't quite understand the question, but I think what you can say to him is, I said I wanted to set a boundary around sex and your slips or whatever, but I want to have intimate relationships with you, and I do want to connect with you, and you are important to me, and I don't want to hear about the cat. In fact, I'll say this. One of the primary things I hear from almost every spouse, every one of you spouses, when you talk about the pain you're in, is not necessarily he or she had sex with this person. That hurts. It's terrifying. It makes you crazy. I get that. But what really is the most hurtful part, and what I hear the most from you, is I don't feel listened to. I don't feel like I'm with somebody. I feel like I'm talking to a wall. I feel like nothing meaningful happens in our exchanges or conversations. I feel alone in this relationship, or I feel like I'm raising another child, my kids and this person. So I do think that the issue you're talking about, which is lack of intimacy in your relationship, is one to address. And you can address intimacy, honesty, and being connected without, and put a boundary around that particular thing. I can say to Tammy, I really like to talk. I appreciate your friendship, but I don't want to talk about my mom. Great. We don't talk about my mom. Or I have even said to friends, I've even heard from friends who are drinking, I have a problem with drinking, and I have a problem with drinking, but I don't want to talk about it. I'm just not ready, or I don't want to. I respect that. They're going to find out their own issues when they do. And I don't have to hear about it, or they don't have to talk about it. So I think what you can say is, I want intimate conversations and meaningful connections, but I want to put a boundary around that subject. Perfectly fine. You're absolutely right. It's important to say all of that.
Okay. So then the next question is, My husband hid his sex addiction for 23 years of our marriage. Addiction, alcohol, and gambling is on both sides of his family of origin. His dad drank and may have been a sex addict. Worried about it if our children, we get this a lot, if our children, 22-year-old girl and 19-year-old boy, may have inherited this disease. Do we have the talk and let them know their dad is a sex addict?
Well, Tammy, you said you get these a lot, so why don't you start?
So I'm the only addict in my family. Like I'm not, like there isn't, so it isn't all about hereditary. And I suspect that you as mom has been doing a good job of nurturing, it doesn't, many people get enough, within their family situation. It isn't just an automatic, oh, you're an addict, so therefore, your children are going to be addicts. I almost didn't have children because of, like, I was concerned about that. And I thought, well, that's just ridiculous. And my daughter, my biological daughter, she's a lightweight when it comes to alcohol. It's hysterical. She is not an addict. But you know what? I also gave her enough, she was parented with enough to know that her emotions mattered, that there was trust. She could, all of the things to nurture she had. Did I do it perfectly? Heck no. But, so there isn't. Dr. Rob and I have talked about this a lot in other webinars too. Like, no kid wants to, they don't want to know about their parents' sex lives and things. If there's alcohol and gambling, that's usually kind of more obvious. So it can be, there's problematic behaviors and there's some compulsive addictive behaviors, and he's working on all aspects of this, but I think it's difficult, and those are young adults. So unless you have a suspicion that they are struggling with these issues themselves, it's challenging, because it can also put a negative lens on relationships and healthy attachment too. So, Dr. Rob?
I agree with you, Tammy. I would never want my children or grandchildren or anything to know about my sex life. It's just, no one, once you hear that, you can't unhear it, and you're going to take it to your grave that your parent did this or did that sexually. It's not my kid's job to understand my sexual life. It is okay to tell them that, dad's really been struggling and, with various issues, I'd rather not talk about them because they were unique to your dad. But I do want to say that we have a propensity in our family for depression, for addictions, for intimacy and relationship problems. And so I want you to be aware that those issues can show up for you or your kids. And I want you to be able to know that there's a history here, so you can, be aware. I don't think you have to say sex addict. I would say emotional issues, some compulsive stuff, some depression. They just need to know that there are issues that may affect them. The other thing is, there's a bunch of things here. I just want to say about family of origin versus, so there are certain things that we do inherit, and there's certain things we don't. I do not believe we inherit sex addiction. What I do believe is we inherit a propensity for addictive behavior and mental health problems. And then because of the way we're raised and the things that happen to us, we end up as sex addicts. So a lot of behavioral addictions are really about the nature part and not the nurture. I'm sorry, the nurture part and not the nature part. But things like alcoholism, for example, are often biological. And Tammy, I would imagine she wanted to go drink me under the table because her body is wired to be able to do that. I have a half a glass of wine and I get a headache. So there's a biological propensity. This is why certain ethnic groups are more likely to have alcoholism, because that's how their brains and their bodies work. So not everyone, you don't always inherit addiction, but you can inherit the potential for addiction. The only thing about your kids and what they may have from you is, and I'm just gonna be really honest, I think our kids observe how we interact with each other. And so if your spouse has been less than supportive of you and you felt anxious about that, if he or she has been distant from you and you felt that, if your communication has not been intimate and they've seen that, then they are going to, their understanding of relationships is going to mirror what you did in front of them. So, for instance, with non-intimate parents, I think kids can challenge with intimacy because they've never seen it. But you can learn what it is, what it's about, and how to experience it. So another way to say it is, Dad and I have had some issues, and I don't want to deny them. They probably let you down, blah, blah, blah. But I do want you to know, if you have challenges, they're not just yours. We were not perfect parents. I want to say this just for me personally, and this is really personal for me. It would have meant the world to me, the world to me. My life would be different if one of my caregivers had said, you know what, our family was really troubled, or we hid mom's mental illness from you, or if there was just any acknowledgement at all that there were actually problems in my family. That would have taken a lot of pressure off of me, because as a little kid, I just thought it was all my fault, and nobody corrected that for me. So I do think to acknowledge that your children, that everything wasn't perfect and there are some issues, and they have shown up and they may affect you. I think that is important to say. But the details, I don't think are important to say. But I do want all of you to know how meaningful it is to a child to say, you know what, we weren't perfect parents, and we did some of these things, and call them out, because that helps them feel more sane and more understood and more like they're not crazy. I did want to say one thing before we stop about the work that we do, because I don't know that everyone does understand this, but I will say it. Because we were writing little biographies, Tammy and I, today, and stuff to put on our website, on the Seeking Integrity website. And one of the things that I had to write is that I've trained almost every, well, if you include my books and stuff, I have trained every CSAT in the country. Every single one has undergone either my individual personal training in front of a group when they were getting their CSAT, or they've studied some of my books or watched us online and learned from that. So just so you know, I don't know all of them by name, but any one of them in the country will call me and reach out to me. And we have a 35-person therapy. We have 35 therapists who meet with us every day tomorrow for their free sessions with me. And I sit with them and we go through their cases and we discuss them. So one of the gifts that I am really proud of and glad to give you is 30 years of expertise. To give this away from you is such a gift. And for those of you who want to take courses or read books or go to the treatment center, that pays for everyone to get the stuff that's free. But I'm really thrilled as
But it's
really
still a really good value. I'm like, yes, but honestly, to have a life-changing experience and the level of expertise, that happens at our treatment. I mean, I'm blown away by our expert treatment clinical team, and you are there working with clients. I think the work groups are solid. They're live facilitated, not just watching a video. The fee-based stuff is still a very, as low cost as we can have it be, to provide the level of care that we do. So to have a life-changing experience, not experience a divorce, not have to, it's worth every penny. So sorry to interrupt.
And I wanted to say to you, Tammy, that this is where we started the whole thing today, which is how grateful I am and we are to have had so many terrible experiences in the past that we can turn them around and make ourselves useful to you. And some of that is paid and some of that is unpaid and some, whatever. But I wish I'd had teachers and parents who could actually help me how to be a better person. Some teachers did, but I didn't have a family that could. I had to figure that out in the 12 steps in therapy, how to be a decent person, not hurt people. Please take advantage of what we have to offer, whether it's free or paid or whatever it is, because there aren't a lot more experts at this level out there on a whole bunch of levels than me and Tammy. So anyway, bless you folks.
I wanted the peer case consultation. Those are the people that I generally refer to, because they are coming and they're asking for input. They're asking, do I have a blind spot on this, or what is going to help me do the very best work for my client, betrayed partner or addict or the couple. And I love that about them. And I appreciate that you give an hour of your week to talk to them free, to help them do the work with more integrity. So it's great. So thank you to everyone who joined tonight. We appreciate your questions. I typed a few answers and resources in along the way, but bring them back next week. Dr. David's on Wednesday night. Keep plugging into sexandrelationshiphealing.com, and then some support resources for a fee, but low cost, and the information on our treatment program. It can really help. So thanks,
everybody.
everybody.
Have a great evening. Enjoy the fall weather and the trees.